Welcome to AudioCert, where the official study guides are brought to life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we're really embarking on a crucial exploration. We're diving into the very foundation of modern cybersecurity. We're looking at the EC Council Certified Threat Intelligence Analyst, or, CTIA certification. If you're aiming to be right at the forefront, truly understanding, analyzing, and importantly, proactively combating cyber threats. Well, it's not just nice to have, it's essential. The CTIA isn't just about getting another credential, it's really about developing those specialized skills to transform, all that raw, noisy data into clear, actionable intelligence. And today's focus might seem a bit basic at first glance. Chapter 7, the Glossary of Terms. Now, before you think, oh, glossary, seriously, isn't that just a list of words to memorize? Maybe hold that thought. Okay, let's unpack this. Because diving deep into a glossary, especially one like this, is absolutely vital. It's not about rote learning, it's about nailing down a precise, shared vocabulary. I mean, imagine trying to handle a critical incident response when, half your team uses data and intelligence to mean the same thing. Or maybe vulnerability means one thing to the analyst and something totally different to the boss. In this fast-paced world of cyber threats, that kind of ambiguity, it can lead to critical mistakes, wasted effort, and ultimately missed chances to defend yourselves. It's kind of like trying to solve a super complex puzzle without knowing what half the pieces even look like.
That's exactly right. And what's really fascinating here is that this isn't just some simple list of definitions you cram before an exam. This glossary acts as the bedrock, the kind of universal language for the entire field of cyber threat intelligence. Think of it as the shared blueprint, the plan everyone uses for understanding and building effective defenses. If everyone involved, from the analyst dealing with alerts day to day, all the way up to the CISO planning next year's strategy, isn't speaking precisely the same language, well, critical details just get lost, miscommunicated. And that clarity is what prevents misinterpretation, which, let's face it, in our line of work can have some pretty serious consequences. Delayed responses, deploying the wrong tools, it cascades. So this raises an important question. How do these terms, which might seem separate, actually connect? How do they build up that bigger picture, that holistic understanding of an adversary's thinking and the whole threat landscape? Today we're going to connect those dots. We'll show you how each piece fits into that larger, really vital puzzle of threat intelligence. Hashtag deep dive discussion.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this field, and honestly, just to talk about it effectively, we absolutely need to start with the basics, the fundamental building blocks. It's pretty common, in everyday chat to use words like data, information, and intelligence almost interchangeably. But in CTIA, and really in any serious intelligence work, they have distinct, crucial meanings. They define the value, right? Can you break that down for us? Maybe start at the bottom.
Absolutely. And thinking of it as a pyramid is actually a really helpful way to visualize it. Each layer builds on the one below, refining it, leading to, more understanding and actual usefulness. So at the very bottom, the absolute rawest form, we have data. Data, in its raw state, well, it usually exists in huge volumes. It might describe an object or an individual, but crucially, it lacks any context. It's completely unprocessed. Imagine millions of individual firewall logs just scrolling past on a screen, or single IP addresses, maybe sensor readings from network devices. They're just isolated facts, like individual puzzle pieces just scattered on a table, or maybe single words pulled randomly from a dictionary. By themselves, they don't tell you much, no story, no purpose, they just are.
Okay, so data is just raw bits, scattered, no context. What's that next critical step then? How do we start making sense of it, turning those fragments into something, coherent?
Right. So once you start connecting those pieces, maybe organizing those random words into actual sentences, you elevate it to information. Information is basically an interconnected bunch of that raw data, but now it provides meaningful context. It states facts. It lets you answer the basic questions: who, what, when, where. So for instance, that raw IP address we mentioned, it becomes information when you link it to a specific timestamp, maybe a user account, and a failed login attempt originating from a particular region. Now, you know what happened, who might be involved, when it occurred, and from where. It's like those scattered puzzle pieces are now connected, forming little sections of the picture, or those words forming sentences. You have facts, but you don't necessarily have foresight yet.
Right. And then to get to that top level, intelligence, the peak of the pyramid, I guess there's another layer, some deeper processing and insight needed, something that goes beyond just what happened.
Here's where it gets really interesting. And frankly, where the value skyrockets. Yes, the peak of that pyramid, the ultimate goal for decision-making, is intelligence. This isn't just raw facts or even facts with context. It's analyzed and interpreted information. It provides broader, in-depth knowledge about the subject, and it's specifically crafted to support decision-making and response actions. Intelligence answers those crucial questions. Why? And, maybe more importantly, so what? It helps you anticipate threats, understand what the adversary is really trying to do, and act proactively. It's about understanding, foresight, and crucially, actionable insights. Let's make that concrete. Knowing an IP tried to log in from somewhere specific at a certain time, that's information. Okay, but that transforms into intelligence when you understand why that specific IP is trying to log in. Maybe it's part of a known advanced persistent threat, an APT campaign that's known to target your industry. Maybe they're exploiting a brand new vulnerability. This deeper understanding reveals the adversary's intent, their capabilities, and crucially, what specific defensive actions you should take right now.
It's like finally seeing the completed puzzle image or understanding the whole plot of the book. It gives you that complete picture, allowing you to make predictions or plan effective defenses. And look, understanding this progression is absolutely fundamental because it guides you in a CTIA role to know what you're working with at each stage and what the ultimate goal always is. Not just hoarding data, but generating actionable intelligence that genuinely protects your organization.
Okay, that distinction between data, info, and intelligence is super clear now. Let's focus on the threat part of CTIA. When we talk about a cyber threat in this world, how does that definition get more specific than just, bad things happening online?
Yeah, that's a great point. We need precision. A cyber threat is defined quite specifically as an act where an adversary attempts to gain unauthorized access to an organization's network, usually by exploiting communication paths or vulnerabilities. It's the hostile action itself, or the potential for it to occur, aimed at compromising your systems or data. It's the bad thing, plus the malicious actor with intent behind it. It's different from a vulnerability, remember, which is just a weakness. The threat is the active danger, the potential for harm.
Got it. So if the cyber threat is the hostile act or potential act, then cyber threat intelligence, CTI, must be about applying that intelligence layer we just discussed, right? Moving beyond just spotting the danger to deeply understanding it.
Precisely. Cyber threat intelligence, CTI, is defined as the collection and analysis of information about threats and adversaries, and then drawing patterns from that analysis. Patterns that provide the ability to make knowledgeable decisions for preparedness, prevention, and response against various cyber attacks. It's that proactive knowledge that empowers your defense. Think of it this way. A cyber threat is like an incoming missile. CTI isn't just spotting it on the radar screen. It's all the background stuff. The satellite images, the human intel, the deep analysis that helps you understand where it came from, its path, its target, what it can do, and most importantly, what defenses you need to deploy and when. The real power of CTI isn't just knowing what threats are out there. It's recognizing that every adversary, no matter how slick they are, operates within constraints they have, a budget of time, resources, risk they're willing to take. Good CTI helps you figure out where their budget is tightest, allowing you to build defenses that make attacking you just too expensive, too time-consuming, forcing them to look for easier targets. So, to illustrate, imagine you get a detailed CTI report. It doesn't just say, hey, new malware out there. No. Instead, it details a specific APT group's tactics, techniques, and procedures, their TTPs, right after they hit a similar company in your sector. Now, that report becomes actionable intelligence you can use. It tells you exactly what signs to look for, which vulnerabilities they likely used, and what specific actions like patching certain systems or blocking specific network traffic you can take right now to harden your defenses before they even think about targeting you. That's CTI, empowering informed defense.
Okay, so before an attack actually works, there's nearly always some kind of weak spot, right? Something the bad guy can take advantage of. This brings us to terms like vulnerability and exploit. How do these two fit together in the story of an attack?
Right. A vulnerability is the existence of a weakness. It could be a flaw in the design, maybe an error in how something was implemented or coded. When that weakness is exploited, it leads to an unexpected, undesirable event that compromises the security of the system. It's an inherent flaw, basically, something that shouldn't be there, like unpatched software or a server configured incorrectly. An exploit, then, is the specific method or maybe a piece of code or a tool that's used to take advantage of that vulnerability. It's the mechanism that actually breaches the security. Think of it like this. A vulnerability is like having a crack in the foundation of your house. It's a weak point. An exploit is the specific hammer or maybe a crowbar someone uses to widen that crack and break through the wall to get inside.
Ah, okay. So you need the crack and the hammer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without that crack,
The hammer is useless in that context. You need both for the breach to actually happen.
And when we put together these weak points, the tools to leverage them, and then add in the adversary's intent and their capability, that leads us straight to risk, right? We hear that word constantly in business, but what's the specific CTIA angle? It feels like the end result of all these potential bad things lining up.
Indeed. Risk specifically refers to a degree of uncertainty, or maybe the expectation of potential damage, that an adverse event might cause to the systems or resources of an organization under certain conditions. It's not just about the flaw itself, the vulnerability. It's about the probability of that flaw being exploited by a threat actor using an exploit, and the potential impact of that event on your business operations, finances, reputation, you name it. This leads directly to risk management. And that's the systematic process of identifying risks, assessing them, figuring out how to respond, and then implementing activities to control how the organization manages the potential effects of those risks. So it's not enough just to know you have a crack in the wall, the vulnerability. You need to figure out if there's someone out there with a hammer, the exploit, who actually wants to break in, threat actor intent, if they can realistically do it, threat actor capability, and how much this stuff inside is worth, asset value. All these pieces feed into your overall risk assessment, and they inform your risk management strategy. Are you going to patch the wall, install alarms, move the valuables somewhere else? It's a dynamic thing, constantly weighing probabilities and consequences.
Okay, we've covered the building blocks of intelligence, defined threats, and looked at how vulnerabilities get exploited. Now, let's focus on maybe the most dynamic, sometimes the slipperiest part of the whole equation. Who are we actually up against? Understanding the adversary isn't just about naming them, it's about predicting their moves, right? Like a high-stakes chess game that's always changing. So what are some of the common ways we classify these adversaries in CTIA?
Absolutely. Knowing your enemy is cybersecurity 101. It helps predict moves and tailor defenses. Classification is key. We see several distinct categories. For example, you have hacktivists. These are individuals, maybe loosely organized groups, who promote a political agenda by hacking. Often they deface websites or try to disable services to make a statement, maybe highlight some perceived injustice. Their motivation is ideological. Then there are cyber terrorists. These individuals often have a wider range of skills, also motivated by religious or political beliefs, but their aim is usually to create fear through large-scale corruption of computer networks, potentially targeting critical infrastructure, think power grids, financial systems. The distinction. Often it's about the intended scale of disruption, the skill level involved, and whether the primary goal is making a statement versus causing widespread panic or even physical harm.
Okay, so hacktivists and cyber terrorists are driven by beliefs, by ideology. What about the actors who are after more tangible things like money or national secrets? That sounds like a different category altogether.
Indeed it is. Different motivations, different capabilities usually. That's where you run into groups like industrial spies. These are individuals trying to attack companies purely for commercial purposes, stealing trade secrets, intellectual property, maybe competitive intelligence to help out a rival company, or even a foreign government. Their motivation is economic or strategic gain. We also see organized hackers. These are basically professional criminals. They aim to attack systems specifically for profit. Often they operate as sophisticated criminal enterprises involved in things like large-scale ransomware campaigns, credit card fraud rings, or massive data theft operations. And then arguably at the top tier in terms of resources, sophistication, and stealth, you have state-sponsored hackers. These are individuals employed directly or indirectly by a government. Their mission: to penetrate systems, gain top-secret information, or maybe even damage the information systems of other governments or critical entities. These highly capable groups are often behind advanced persistent threats, APTs. That's where an attacker gets unauthorized access to a target network and just stays there, undetected. Often for a very long time, quietly stealing sensitive data or maintaining access for future operations. You can sort of think of it like a hierarchy of criminal groups, yeah? From maybe opportunistic street gangs up to highly organized cartels, and then all the way up to national intelligence agencies. Each level has different resources, motivations, and operational styles, which fundamentally changes how you need to defend against them.
What about the other end of the spectrum? The less sophisticated attackers, or even threats coming from inside the organization. We often focus outwards, but insiders can be incredibly damaging, right?
You're absolutely right to bring that up. Often overlooked, but still significant. At the less sophisticated end, we have script kiddies. These are, well, unskilled hackers. They compromise systems basically by running pre-made scripts, tools, and software developed by more skilled hackers. They might lack deep understanding, but their sheer volume, their opportunistic nature can tie up a lot of resources. They can be a costly distraction. Or worse, They might just stumble onto a critical vulnerability that more sophisticated actors hadn't even found yet. And a particularly tricky and concerning type is the insider threat. This refers to a threat originating from people within the organization. Could be disgruntled current employees, maybe recently fired employees holding a grudge, or even just undertrained staff who accidentally cause a breach through negligence. Insider threats are uniquely dangerous because they already have authorized access. They know the systems, the data, the weak spots. They don't need to break in. They're already inside the castle walls.
And then there's that really dramatic term, suicide hackers. That sounds extreme. What does that mean?
Yes. Suicide hackers are individuals who aim to bring down critical infrastructure for a cause, and crucially, they are not worried about facing jail time or any other kind of punishment. Their extreme motivation, this disregard for personal consequences, makes them particularly unpredictable and exceptionally hard to deter using conventional methods. Law enforcement, military deterrence. It might not apply.
Yeah.
They're driven by an uncompromising ideology, not profit or state goals, making their threat profile unique and, frankly, very serious. #OB. Understanding adversary intent, capability, and opportunity.
Okay, so beyond just who they are, it seems absolutely vital to understand what they're trying to achieve, how good they are at it, and crucially, if they actually have a way in. These next terms, intent, capability, opportunity, feel like they capture that core framework for assessing any threat actor, right?
Exactly.
When a CTIA professional looks at a threat, they have to evaluate these three critical components to get the full picture. It's a fundamental triad. Intent refers to the purpose, the objective that an adversary wants to achieve by exploiting a threat. It's their why. Are they after money, state secrets, political disruption, just chaos? Understanding their intent helps you predict their likely targets and methods. That's invaluable for getting ahead of them. Then, capability. This is the measure of their ability to actually do something harmful up to a level that could potentially damage the target. It's the can they pull it off question. This means assessing their skills, the sophistication of their tools, their resources, their technical access. A script kiddie might have bad intent, but their capability against a really hardened target is likely low. A state-sponsored group, very high capability. And finally, opportunity. This includes the vulnerabilities, the flaws, the openings in the target organization's systems that enable the attacker to actually launch an attack. It's the can they get in part.
Even with high intent and high capability, if there's simply no opportunity, meaning your defenses are solid, locked down tight, the attack probably won't succeed. So a CTIA pro needs to assess all three. High intent plus high capability plus ample opportunity. Well, that equals a very high risk that demands immediate attention and action.
So if we can get a handle on their intent and capability and spot the opportunities they might go after, we're not just reacting anymore. We can start to predict their moves, anticipate what they might do next. This is where intelligence really starts to pay off, isn't it?
That's precisely the goal. And it's where we shift from just playing defense to playing proactive security. This whole process is called adversary behavioral identification. It involves identifying the common methods, the techniques, those TTPs we keep mentioning that an adversary typically follows to launch attacks and get into an organization's network. This moves beyond just looking at what happened in a single past attack to understanding how they generally operate, what's their playbook. By understanding their usual behaviors, their favorite tools, their typical attack chains, we can proactively put defenses in place that specifically disrupt those patterns, making it much harder for them to succeed. This insight is what lets us move from just reacting after the fact to a much more predictive, more resilient security posture. It's kind of like learning an opponent's tells in a high-stakes poker game.
Right. We've dissected the adversary. Now let's dig into the how. When we think about where an attack might come from or what specific part of our infrastructure it targets, there are some useful categories, right, to help focus our defensive thinking.
Certainly. These categories definitely help analysts narrow their focus when they're investigating something or just trying to assess potential threats. Because, each category needs different kinds of protection. First, we often distinguish application threats. This is where attackers exploit vulnerabilities within a specific software application to steal or maybe destroy data. It could be a flaw in a web app, a database, any software you rely on. Then you've got host threats. These specifically target a particular system, a host where valuable information lives. Could be a server, a user's workstation, even a virtual machine. Often they exploit OS vulnerabilities or maybe just misconfigurations on that specific machine. And finally, network threats. These happen as information travels between systems through those communication channels. A malicious actor might break into the channel itself to steal or manipulate the data flowing over the network. This involves hitting weaknesses in network protocols, devices like routers or switches, or the underlying infrastructure connecting everything. Categorizing threats this way helps us, compartmentalize and prioritize our defense strategies. Helps us understand where to put the right controls. Hashtag tech be it too. Common attack techniques in social engineering.
Okay, beyond those broad target categories, what about the specific techniques attackers use, the actual methods they employ to achieve their goals? The how in the attack chain?
Yeah, there are many, but some are very common. A frequent one, often causing major disruption, is a denial of service (DOS) attack. This involves intentionally denying the availability of a service to legitimate users. The goal is simply to overwhelm the target website, application, network, so real users can't get in. Now, to make these attacks more powerful and harder to block, attackers sometimes coordinate huge networks of compromised systems. We call that a botnet. They use this botnet to launch the DOS attack from many places at once, creating a distributed denial of service (DDoS) attack. Imagine like hundreds of thousands of people trying to shove their way into a single small shop all at the same time. They wouldn't all fit, right? And legitimate customers definitely couldn't get in. That's effectively denying service.
And we hear so much about social engineering. It feels less technical, but maybe more insidious because it plays on people, on psychology, not system flaws. What are some of those common tactics?
Oh, absolutely. Social engineering is fundamentally a non-technical process. The attacker basically misleads a person into giving up confidential information or maybe doing something against their own interest, often without even realizing it. It preys on trust, urgency, curiosity, basic human nature. It takes many forms. Phishing is incredibly common. Sending fake emails that look legit, pretending to be from a trusted site or person, trying to trick users into giving up logins or personal info. Impersonation is where an attacker literally pretends to be someone else, maybe tech support, a new colleague, even a delivery person to gain trust and access information, or even physical areas. Shoulder surfing is more physical. Secretly watching someone type passwords, view sensitive stuff on their screen, just looking over their shoulder, basically. Old school, but still works. Piggybacking usually means getting into a secure building or area with the consent, maybe implicit, of an authorized person, often through distraction, charm, or just blending in. And tailgating is similar, but it's gaining access without consent, just following someone closely through a door they just opened before it shuts.
And it's worth mentioning reverse social engineering, too. That's where the attacker sets themselves up as an authority figure, like fake IT support, so employees actually come to them for help, voluntarily giving up info. It flips the script. These techniques exploit human factors, making awareness training a really critical defense.
What about physical methods? Or exploiting really immediate opportunities, things that might seem less sophisticated but are still dangerous if overlooked?
Right, don't discount the low-tech stuff. Dumpster diving is a classic example. Still surprisingly effective. It's literally retrieving sensitive info by searching through trash bins. People throw out documents, old hard drives, sticky notes. You'd be amazed what you can find. Electronically, eavesdropping is secretly listening in. Could be phone calls, video conferences, or even sniffing unencrypted network traffic, just listening for useful intel. And if an attacker manages to exploit a vulnerability on a system to gain higher levels of access than they started with, that's called an elevation of privilege. This is a critical step in many attacks. It lets them go from being maybe a limited user to an administrator, giving them much more control to do damage or steal data. Hashtag see malware and associated analysis.
Okay, let's dive into the heart of many attacks. Malicious software. We throw around the term malware a lot. What exactly is it, and what are the main types that CTIA pros really need to understand inside and out?
Right, malware is just the umbrella term. It simply means any program designed to perform malicious acts. It covers a whole zoo of nasty software. Some common types include a virus. This is a self-replicating program that makes copies of itself by attaching to another program, maybe the computer's boot sector, or even a document like a Word file. Crucially, it needs a host program to spread. A worm is also a malicious program that replicates and executes, but it spreads across network connections, often independently, without needing to attach to other programs. Worms exploit network vulnerabilities to propagate, sometimes really fast, sometimes without any user clicking anything. And then there's ransomware. This one is particularly nasty and financially driven. It's a type of malware that restricts access to your files and folders, usually by encrypting them. Then it demands an online ransom payment to the attackers to get the key and remove the restrictions. So maybe an analogy helps. A virus needs a host, like a parasite needs an organism to live in. A worm can move on its own, like an independent creature spreading across the network. Ransomware, that's like digital hostage taking, locking up your valuables until you pay.
So once we find this stuff, this malware, how do we actually analyze it? How do we figure out where it came from, what it does, and what damage it might cause? This seems absolutely critical for defense.
Absolutely.
Malware analysis is a cornerstone of CTIA work. It's basically reverse engineering a specific piece of malware to figure out its origin, its functionality, and its potential impact. We have two main ways of doing this. Static malware analysis. This is also called code analysis. It involves carefully examining the executable binary code without actually running it. This gives us clues about its structure, what functions it imports, any embedded strings, its potential capabilities. It helps us understand what it might do without letting it actually do it. It's like studying the blueprint of a bomb without setting it off. Then there's dynamic malware analysis, or behavioral analysis. This involves actually executing the malware, but in a very controlled, safe environment. We watch how it interacts with the host system, what changes it makes, what network connections it tries. This shows us its actual behavior in real time. Now, to do dynamic analysis safely, you absolutely need sandboxing. This is a technique where you set up an isolated, secure environment like a virtual cuckoo's nest for testing and analysis. It prevents the malware from infecting your real systems or spreading.
We also use system baselining. This means capturing a snapshot of the system state before you run the malware, its files, registry keys, running processes. Then, after running the malware in the sandbox, you take another snapshot and compare the two. This meticulously shows exactly what changes the malware made, revealing its full impact.
And for quickly identifying known malicious files, especially across big networks, how do we fingerprint a threat?
Right, for quick ID and tracking, we use a few key techniques. File fingerprinting is the process of calculating a unique hash value, like a digital fingerprint, for a given binary file. These hash values, generated by algorithms like SHA-1 or MD5, are unique identifiers for specific malicious files. If you find a file on your network and its hash matches a known malicious hash, boom, you know exactly what you're dealing with instantly. Tools like Yariara are fantastic here. It's open source software that lets security researchers create rules to detect, classify, and share threat data about malware samples, often leveraging these fingerprints and other patterns within the code. Yariara rules let you define pattern-specific strings, byte sequences to identify whole families of malware, not just single files. Furthermore, there's MAEC, Malware Attribute Enumeration and Characterization. This is a community effort, a structured language for encoding and sharing really detailed information about malware. It focuses on attributes like behaviors, artifacts it creates, and even relationships between different malware samples. This standardization makes sharing intel much easier and more consistent across different tools and teams.
Okay, with so many different adversaries, attack methods, malware types, it feels like threat intelligence could get chaotic really fast without some kind of structure. I assume there are established frameworks, methodologies, ways to help analysts organize their thinking and actions. What are some of those key models CTIA pros use?
You're absolutely right. Without structure, threat intel is just a sea of noise. One really prominent framework, widely used, is the cyber kill chain methodology. It's a core part of intelligence-driven defense. It's designed to help identify and prevent malicious intrusions by breaking down an attack into 7 distinct stages: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, or C2, and finally, actions on objectives. By understanding each step in that chain, from the initial probing by the adversary all the way to their final goal, it helps you pinpoint exactly where you can intervene and disrupt the attack. It's kind of like analyzing a football play, yeah? Understanding each step from the snap to the pass to the potential touchdown helps you figure out the best way to defend against it, where to tackle, or to intercept.
That sounds very structured, very sequential. Are there other models that maybe look at adversary behavior or the attack itself from a different angle?
Yep.
Maybe less linear?
Yes, definitely. Another powerful one is the Diamond Model Framework. This is used to characterize organized threats, track them consistently if they evolve over time, tell one threat group apart from another, and then figure out ways to counter them. It describes an attack by focusing on 4 core features: the adversary, their capability, the infrastructure they use, and the victim. And crucially, it maps the relationships between these 4 points. It gives a more holistic view, connecting the technical bits to the human and operational aspects. For assessing potential impact, we also have DREAD. DREAD's an acronym: damage, reproducibility, exploitability, affected users, and discoverability. It's basically a scoring system, a way to calculate, compare, and rank the possible severity of different threats or risks you've identified. These models aren't just academic exercises. Think of analysts as a common language, a shared structure for thinking about and communicating complex threats, making sure nothing critical gets missed.
And what about specific methodologies, like step-by-step processes for doing threat analysis or risk assessment? These sound more like structured workflows.
Exactly. Methodologies provide the how-to. We have PASTA, process for attack simulation and threat analysis. This is a 7-stage risk-based modeling approach. It's implemented for dynamic threat detection, figuring out potential attack paths, and scoring risks. It really emphasizes thinking like an attacker. Another significant one is OCD, Operationally Critical Threat, Asset, and Vulnerability Evaluation. This is often described as a heavyweight methodology. It's resource-intensive but very thorough. It focuses on identifying risks to an organization's operationally critical assets and helps plan countermeasures accordingly. And then there's TRIKE. This is an open-source threat modeling methodology. It follows a more pragmatic risk management approach, focusing on creating risk models that directly lead to actionable decisions and security controls. And again, these aren't just concepts to know for a test. You will actually use these frameworks and methodologies to systematically tackle complex threat scenarios in a CTIA role. They ensure your analysis is consistent, thorough, and repeatable. #B, threat modeling and attack categorization.
So if the goal is to get ahead of attacks, not just react, then threat modeling seems like a really critical proactive step. What does that actually involve? How do we practically put on our bad guy hat?
Yeah, threat modeling is exactly that. It's a systematic procedural method for identifying and analyzing potential threats, and then ranking them based on how malicious they might be and the level of risk they pose. It's all about proactively thinking like an attacker before they attack, often during the design phase of a system or application, to find weaknesses first. A really helpful visual tool here is a threat tree. This is a hierarchical diagram. It helps the analyst identify threats and understand the complete potential attack methodology for those threats. It basically maps out all the different paths an attacker could take to reach a specific goal or compromise a specific asset. It's kind of like building a detailed architectural model of your house and then systematically trying to find every single way a burglar could possibly get in every door, window, vent, maybe even a weak spot in the wall, so you can then reinforce them before anyone tries. It's much more efficient than cleaning up after a break-in.
And are there specific, maybe well-known categories of threats or vulnerabilities that threat modeling helps us classify to make sure we cover all the bases?
Yes, one very widely used set of categories, especially when designing software or systems, is STRIDE. STRIDE is an acronym it stands for: spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. These are common categories of vulnerabilities or threats that act like a checklist, helping ensure a broad range of potential issues are considered during threat modeling. So spoofing, that's where an attacker impersonates someone or something else to trick a victim or system. Tampering, that's modifying data or code maliciously to exploit something. Repudiation, this is about denying you did something, often by messing with logs, making it hard to prove attribution. Information disclosure, that's leaking sensitive data that shouldn't be leaked. Denial of service, we covered that, making things unavailable. And elevation of privilege, gaining higher access levels. Another relevant term here is VAST, Visual, Agile, and Simple Threat Modeling, which, well, the name says it all. It emphasizes a clear, adaptable, often graphical approach to applying these concepts. STRIDE, though, is really useful as that mental checklist to make sure you think broadly about potential threats, going beyond just technical bugs to consider things like accountability and privacy too. #TC. The threat intelligence lifecycle.
It definitely sounds like threat intelligence isn't something you just do once. It's not like you get a report, read it, and you're done. Is there a continuous cycle involved, like a feedback loop that's always adapting?
Absolutely. You've hit on a key point. The threat intelligence lifecycle is a truly continuous process. It's about developing intelligence from raw data, constantly supporting the organization in building defenses to handle emerging risks and threats. It's never really finished because the threat landscape itself is always changing, evolving, like a living thing. The cycle typically involves several key stages: planning, figuring out what you need to know, defining those intelligence requirements, collection, gathering the raw data from various sources, processing, making that raw data usable, normalizing it, structuring it, analysis, turning the processed information into actual intelligence, finding the so what, dissemination, getting the finished intelligence to the right people, the decision makers in the right format. And critically, once intelligence is disseminated, it feeds back into the planning stage. It informs new questions, new requirements, and the cycle starts all over again. It's constantly looping, adapting to new threats, new adversary tactics, and changing organizational needs. It's also really important here to consider the threat intelligence maturity model. This describes the different levels of how effectively an organization uses threat intelligence. It helps organizations understand where they stand right now. Maybe they're just doing basic ad hoc collection, or maybe they have highly integrated proactive intelligence operations. It provides a kind of roadmap showing how much more secure an organization can become by maturing its threat intel processes. It's a journey,
not a destination. And your role as a CTIA analyst is often to help drive that maturity forward.
Okay, so if we suspect an attack might be happening, or maybe even just see some weird activity, what are the specific clues, the pieces of evidence we're looking for on our networks or systems that tell us something might be wrong? What are these digital fingerprints attackers leave behind?
Yeah, those crucial clues are called indicators of compromise, IOCs. Basically, IOCs are the clues, the artifacts, the pieces of forensic data found on a network or an operating system that indicate a potential intrusion or some kind of malicious activity within the organization's infrastructure. They are, essentially, the digital breadcrumbs or fingerprints left behind by an attacker. Finding them allows us to detect and respond to an ongoing compromise or even investigate a past one. IOCs can be very specific, like a particular file hash, a known malicious IP address, or a specific domain name used for command and control. Or they can be more general, more behavioral things like unusual network traffic patterns, unexpected system processes running, or maybe strange login activity.
Can you give us some more concrete examples? What exactly would an analyst be hunting for when looking for these IOCs?
Certainly. We look for various types of indicators that can signal something bad is happening. Behavioral indicators. These identify specific, unusual behavior. Maybe a user account suddenly starts accessing files it never has before, or a server starts making connections to weird places on the internet. It's about deviations from the norm. Detection indicators. These refer to specific patterns that can be matched against low-level data. Think like a specific sequence of bytes in network traffic known to belong to a piece of malware, or a specific registry key modification that a certain Trojan always makes. Detection indicators. More specifically, email indicators are huge. Malicious attachments, phishing links hidden in emails, suspicious sender addresses, weird email headers, lots of clues in email traffic. Detection indicators. Host-based indicators are found by analyzing the infected system itself. Unusual changes to the registry, modified system files, new suspicious processes running, unexpected user accounts created, things happening on the machine. These are often linked to host artifacts, the actual forensic traces left by the attacker on the host. Detection indicators.
Similarly, network indicators are found by analyzing network traffic logs. They're useful for spotting connections to known command and control (C2) servers, attempts to deliver malware, unusual data exfiltration, or even fingerprinting the attacker's operating system. These often link to network artifacts, the trails left on the network itself. Now, a really crucial step for you as an analyst is the enrichment of the indicator. This means taking a known indicator, say, an IP address, and linking it with other information available publicly or privately. Who owns the IP? Where is it located? Has it been seen in other attacks? This adds context and makes the indicator much more valuable. We also use tags for context. These provide additional meaning to indicators. Is this IP just a one-off scan, or is it part of a known APT campaign? Tagging helps identify whether an indicator is isolated or part of a bigger, more complex attack.
You mentioned specific file types and system components earlier that could also be indicators. How do things like portable executables or APIs fit into this hunt?
That's a great point, because attackers often mess with these low-level system bits. The portable executables, PE format, that's the standard file format for executables, DLLs, etc. on Windows. It stores all the info. Windows needs to run the code. Anomalies within the PE file header, like weird section names, strange imported functions, packed code, maybe modified timestamps, these can be strong indicators of compromise or malicious tampering. So if you analyze the Windows program and its PE structure looks off, that's a huge red flag. Similarly, application programming interfaces, APIs, are parts of the operating system, like Windows, that let applications access OS functions, file system stuff, network connections, process creation, etc. Malicious software frequently abuses or exploits these APIs to do its dirty work. So monitoring for unusual API calls or specific sequences of calls that are known to be used by malware is extremely important for detecting sophisticated threats. It reveals the underlying actions the software is trying to perform, often betraying its true malicious intent.
Okay, once we have these indicators, these clues, the really big question, and often the hardest one, is always who did this? How do we actually go about attributing an attack? It sounds like some serious digital detective work in a world where everyone's trying to hide.
Attribution is, yeah, it's definitely one of the most challenging parts of threat intelligence. And you're right, it's digital detective work, absolutely fraught with false leads, misdirection, even intentional deception by attackers. It's rarely 100% certain. It usually involves blending technical indicators with human intelligence, geopolitical context, sometimes even linguistic analysis. We approach it using several methods, often in combination. Campaign attribution. This focuses on attributing attacks based on the specific malware used, or the overall strategy and infrastructure of a particular malware campaign. If we see a unique piece of malware with distinct features targeting specific victims, we might link it to known campaigns or actors. Group attribution. This tries to attribute based on the common characteristics of a group or association of multiple malicious actors and their shared attack methods. If several incidents show similar TTPs, use the same custom tools, target the same industry, they might be linked to the same distinct threat group. Intrusion set attribution. This looks at broader patterns of intrusion-repeated behaviors, reused infrastructure, consistent targeting over time that point towards a specific organized set of actors operating with a common purpose or sponsor. Intrusion set attribution. And then at the highest level, there's nation-state attribution. This deals with attributing attacks believed to be sponsored by one nation against another. This is obviously highly sensitive, complex, often involves classified intelligence, and carries major geopolitical weight. The ultimate goal, though it's often really hard to reach with high confidence, is true attribution. This means identifying the specific person, organization, or country that sponsored and executed a well-planned intrusion or attack. It requires overwhelming evidence, piecing together clues from all the other attribution methods. It really is like forensic science for the digital age, trying to reconstruct events and identify the perpetrator from fragments of evidence, but with the added difficulty that the perpetrators are actively trying to cover their tracks and sometimes even plant false flags to mislead investigators.
So before we even start grabbing data for all these indicators and trying to figure out attribution, there has to be a plan, right? We can't just randomly collect everything. What does that planning process look like to make sure we're efficient and focused?
Absolutely. Strategic planning is crucial, otherwise you just drown in data. It starts with defining intelligence requirements. These basically consist of the knowns and unknowns. The key questions the intelligence team needs to answer to provide useful knowledge for decision-making. What do we need to find out? These high-level needs then drive more specific collection requirements. These focus on where we need to look external sources like dark web forums, public breach data, or internal sources like our own network logs, firewall alerts, endpoint data. Based on these requirements, you develop a collection plan. This plan details all the activities involved in collecting the data needed to meet those defined requirements. It specifies sources, methods, timelines, responsibilities. This structured approach ensures you use your resources effectively to gather relevant data, avoiding that common trap of information overload where you collect terabytes of stuff, but none of it actually answers the key questions.
And for the top brass, the executives, the board members, are there specific types of requirements that guide the whole intel collection process for them? They probably need really concise, high-impact answers.
Yes, definitely. For that high-level audience, we define priority intelligence requirements, PIRs. These are the requirements considered essential for senior management to make strategic, operational, or maybe tactical changes to the organization's security posture or infrastructure to reduce risk. They're the absolute need-to-knows for executive decisions. They're often framed as critical questions like, what are the top 3 APT groups targeting our industry right now, and what's their likely impact over the next 12 months? Or maybe, what's the probability of a major ransomware attack hitting us in the next 6 months, and how would it affect our critical business functions? These PIRs directly inform the entire intelligence cycle, making sure the most critical questions get answered first and that the intelligence produced is genuinely useful for that strategic level audience. #B data collection methods and sources. Okay, once we know what intel we need, the next question is how do we collect it and from where? What are the different approaches and types of sources for gathering this raw material? It sounds like there are various ways to go about it, some more direct than others.
You're right. We use a range of collection methods. We often differentiate between a few main types. Active data collection. This is where you're collecting data directly from external networks or systems that might actually be under the adversary's control. This could involve things like probing their infrastructure, running scans, maybe even, in some cases, infiltrating their networks, obviously with careful legal and ethical considerations. Passive data collection. This involves no direct interaction with the adversary at all. It's purely based on analysis and observation of activities happening within your own boundaries or using publicly available information. It's about listening and watching without engaging. Hybrid data collection. This is a mix. It involves collecting data from shared networks, maybe partner systems, or from specific networks you've built specifically to lure and trap adversaries. A key example of that lure is a honeypot. This is an information system resource, could be a fake server, a vulnerable-looking application set up expressly to attract and trap attackers trying to penetrate your network.
That lets you observe their tactics, capture their tools, and gather intelligence safely without risking your real production systems. So think of it like this. Active collection is like directly interrogating a suspect.
Passive collection is like observing them from a distance with binoculars. And a honeypot, that's like setting out a bait car to catch car thieves and study how they operate.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Now, what about the different types of intelligence based on the source itself? We hear acronyms like OSINT all the time, but what do they really mean in practice?
Yeah, there are many categories, often mirroring traditional intelligence disciplines, but adapted for cyber. Open source intelligence. OSINT. This is huge. Information gathered from publicly available sources, news articles, public reports, academic papers, social media posts, forums, even job postings from potential adversary groups. Often the starting point. Human intelligence, human int. Information collected through interpersonal communication, interviews, debriefings, liaison with trusted contacts, direct observation. Can provide crucial insights into motivations, plans, internal dynamics. Signals intelligence, SIGINT. Gathering info by intercepting signals, communications, electronic emissions, telemetry. In cyber, this often means monitoring malicious network traffic or command and control channels. Imagery intelligence, INM. Traditionally satellite photos, aerial recon. In cyber, it might involve mapping adversary physical infrastructure or visualizing network topologies. Measurement and signature intelligence, MECINI. Collecting data from sensors that record distinctive characteristics or signatures, radar emissions, chemical traces. Adapted to cyber, it might involve identifying unique digital fingerprints of malware or infrastructure. Technical intelligence, TECHIN. Info gathered from analyzing an adversary's equipment or captured material. Reverse engineering their malware, analyzing their hardware implants. And increasingly important, financial intelligence, FINIT. Info collected about an adversary's financial activities and transactions. Can reveal funding sources, operational networks, laundering schemes.
And what about the more maybe everyday sources that a CTIA analyst might use constantly? Things that might not feel like traditional intelligence collection.
Right, from a practical cyber standpoint, we heavily rely on social media intelligence. It's also EMINT. Information collected from social networking sites, forums, blogs, can reveal public sentiment, adversary chatter, employee data leaks, reconnaissance efforts, commercial sources, threat intelligence vendors, security companies that collect, curate, and sell threat data feeds and reports, often a very valuable source of pre-analyzed intel, government and law enforcement sources. Information shared by government agencies or police forces, though access and timeliness can vary due to confidentiality or ongoing investigations. Internal intelligence feeds, data from your own infrastructure system logs, security alerts from your SIEM, network flow data, endpoint detection logs, hugely important. External intelligence feeds, data from globally available sources, often industry sharing groups like ISACs, public repositories of IOCs, or academic research. Proactive surveillance feeds, real-time monitoring and assessment of system activities and events, actively hunting for anomalies or suspicious behavior. And we shouldn't forget covert human intelligence sources, CHIS, info collected covertly from individuals by establishing relationships. Obviously, this is a very specialized, sensitive, and ethically complex area, usually handled by dedicated agencies. And we shouldn't forget covert human intelligence sources, CHIS. Even just informal contacts among security professionals, chatting with peers at conferences, sharing observations in private groups can be surprisingly valuable for quick insights in this fast-moving field. And we shouldn't forget covert human intelligence sources, CHIS, #TAC#C. Specialized collection tools and techniques.
Given how massive the internet is, what specific tools or techniques help us gather data more efficiently? Especially for that initial reconnaissance phase, finding clues about adversaries, it seems like you need special tools to search effectively.
Definitely. To navigate that vastness, we use specialized tools and techniques. Advanced Google search operators, sometimes called Google dorking, are invaluable. They let you create really complex search queries to dig up sensitive or hidden information that might have been accidentally exposed online, finding vulnerable servers, login pages, leaked documents. The Google Hacking Database, GHDB, is a great resource. It compiles specific Google search queries known to find common vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. For domain information, basic DNS lookup is fundamental, finding the IP addresses associated with the domain name to map out infrastructure. Reverse DNS lookup does the opposite, finding the domain name for a given IP address. Adversaries sometimes use dynamic DNS, DDNS. That's a technique to assign custom domain names to IP addresses that change frequently, making their infrastructure harder to track over time. Even trickier is fast flux DNS. That's a sophisticated camouflage technique used by botnets to hide their phishing sites or malware delivery servers behind a constantly changing network of compromised bots acting as proxies. It makes them very hard to pin down. We also query WHOIS databases extensively.
These store information about the registered users or assignees of Internet resources like domain names and IP address blocks. There's ThickWho, where the central registry holds complete info, and ThinWho, where the registry just points you to the specific registrar's WHOI server, which holds the details. These databases are often maintained by the regional Internet registries, RIRs, like ARIN, RIPE8, EPIN, etc.
What about looking specifically at websites, digging into them for clues, vulnerabilities, or even just historical context? A website can tell you a lot.
For websites, website footprinting is key. That refers to reconnaissance, doing an in-depth analysis of a website's source code, its structure, the technologies it uses, looking for hidden directories, developer comments left in the code, maybe forgotten test pages, extracting valuable intel about the organization or potential weaknesses. Website mirroring is simply creating an exact copy, a replica of the original website so you can analyze it offline. This lets you poke around thoroughly without constantly interacting with the live site or alerting the target. And for historical context, the Internet Archive, archive.org, also known as the Wayback Machine, is absolutely invaluable. It's an online digital library providing open access to historical versions of websites. This can be crucial for understanding how an adversary's infrastructure evolved, researching past incidents linked to a domain, or finding old contact info or vulnerabilities that might still be relevant. Hashtag DataD, data sharing and collaboration.
Sharing threat intelligence feels like it should be critical for a strong collective defense, right? Especially across different companies or even governments. But it also sounds really tricky, given how sensitive this data can be. PII issues, trust, how is that managed, what frameworks help?
It is paramount. And you're right, it's incredibly complex. There's always a tension between the need to share and the need to protect. Legislatively, in the U.S., for example, you have things like CSPIA, Cyberintelligence Sharing and Protection Act, and CISA, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. These lay out rules for how public and private entities can share cyber threat info and include provisions for protecting sensitive data, like personally identifiable information, PII. For industry-specific collaboration, information sharing and analysis centers, ISACs, are really important. These are typically nonprofit groups that provide a secure platform for companies within a specific sector, finance, energy, healthcare, etc., to share threat information relevant to their industry. There are also community platforms like IOC Bucket, which provide a way for security pros to share threat indicators in a more open, community-driven fashion. Now, to manage the sensitivity of shared information, the Traffic Light Protocol, TLP, is widely used. It's a simple set of designations, red, amber, green, white, that clearly indicates how broadly the recipient is allowed to share the information further. It's a basic but effective way to control dissemination. And of course, formal non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, are common. These are legal contracts between parties to maintain secrecy when sharing sensitive intelligence, especially in bilateral relationships. The big push now, though, is towards machine-readable and automated sharing. This is where standards come in. IODF, Incident Object Description and Exchange Format, provides a standard XML format for sharing incident information. IODF-CA, IOD for Structured Cybersecurity Information, enhances this for better machine readability. IDMF, Intrusion Detection Message Exchange Format, is a standard for intrusion detection systems to report alerts automatically. But the real powerhouses in this space are SDIX, Structured Threat Information Expression, and TAC-T of Trusted Automated Exchange of Intelligence Information. SDIX is the standardized language for describing threat intelligence observables, indicators, TTPs, actors, campaigns. TAC-T is a protocol for actually exchanging that SDIX data automatically between systems. This capability, often called Machine-Readable Threat Intelligence, MRTI, is transformative. It allows security tools like SIEMs, firewalls, endpoint solutions to automatically ingest threat intelligence feeds and make operational decisions based on the current threat landscape, turning intelligence into automated defense actions much faster than humans could alone.
What about the actual structures for sharing? How do organizations connect to exchange this intel? Are there different models?
Yes, we typically see a few different architectural models for intelligence exchange. A centralized exchange architecture. This has a central hub, a repository, where all members send their intelligence and the hub manages and distributes it. Think of a single clearinghouse, a peer-to-peer exchange architecture. Here, community members share information directly with each other, without a central hub. This fosters direct relationships, but can be harder to manage at scale. A hybrid exchange architecture. This combines elements of both. Maybe there's a central hub for certain types of curated intelligence, but members can also share directly for other types of information or urgent alerts. Offers flexibility. All this is underpinned by clear data handling classification methods, like TLP, indicating how the intelligence can be distributed. And often, sharing is facilitated within vertical communities. These are hierarchical chains or groups of organizations within the same business sector, like an ISAC, sharing resources and data tailored to their specific industry's threats.
Okay, so we've collected this mountain of data from all these sources. Now comes the hard part, right? Turning that raw material into something useful. What are the essential steps to structure it, clean it up, and eventually turn it into actual intelligence?
Indeed, the raw data, often just called bulk data, is typically a huge, continuous stream collected from various sources in all sorts of formats. Before you can even think about analyzing it, you need to make it usable. First, normalization is absolutely crucial. This is the process of taking all that unstructured, messy data and structuring it, sorting it, putting it into a consistent format that both humans and automated tools can actually understand and use. This is a key part of data preparation, which is that initial stage involving collection, normalization, maybe some aggregation or filtering. After that, data validation is important, checking in to make sure the data you've collected is actually valid, accurate, and useful for your intelligence needs. No point analyzing garbage. Finally, contextualization. This is where you start adding meaning. It's the process of effectively reducing the sheer volume of data into meaningful content by filtering out the irrelevant noise and highlighting what truly matters for your specific requirements, adding that crucial layer of why is this important. We often start with low-level data raw logs from operating systems, IDS alerts, firewall logs, that kind of thing.
This raw input gets filtered and sorted, maybe by initial analysts, into what we might call exploited data. And eventually, after thorough analysis and interpretation, it becomes production data filtered, analyzed, relevant in the right format, ready for distribution and used by decision makers. And throughout this, we also capture metadata. That's data about the data. When was it collected? What's the source? How reliable is it? This provenance information is critical for understanding and trusting the intelligence later on. Hashtag tag, eventually, core analysis techniques.
So, with the data prepped, structured, contextualized, what are the fundamental ways analysts actually dig into it? What are the core techniques for extracting those useful insights we're aiming for?
Right. Data analysis is the broad term for the whole process. Examining, filtering, transforming, modeling the data to pull out useful information from that bulk collection. It's the journey from raw facts to understanding. A more advanced technique, especially for really large, complex data sets, is data mining. This focuses on discovering hidden patterns, trends, or relationships within huge data sets. It often uses techniques from statistics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, database analytics, etc., to find connections that might not be obvious just by looking. Specifically for our field, we talk about threat analysis. This is the focused process of examining, filtering, transforming, and modeling the threat-specific data we've acquired, with the goal of extracting intelligence that can be disseminated to help defend the organization. Sometimes we might need to do fine-tuning threat analysis. This involves tweaking the parameters of an analysis model, maybe adjusting risk scores or changing correlation rules to better align with changing intelligence requirements, or to get a more precise answer to a specific question.
And for tackling problems that require more intuition or complex reasoning, there's cognitive-based threat analysis. This is an advanced technique trying to combine raw computing power with more human-like thinking capabilities, aiming to simulate pattern recognition or judgment in areas where simple rule-based systems might fail. Maybe think of it like this. Basic data analysis is like looking at all the individual parts of a car to see how they fit together. Data mining is like finding unexpected connections, maybe how wear on one part affects another system over time, leading to new insights you weren't looking for.
I've definitely heard these terms used before, often in business intelligence: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. Can you explain what each one means in a threat intelligence context? It sounds like they represent a kind of evolution in analytical depth, moving from looking back to looking forward.
That's a perfect way to put it. These terms describe the increasing depth and foresight of the analysis we perform, moving us steadily from being reactive to being proactive. Descriptive analysis. This deals with analyzing real-time data about current activities. It tells you what is happening right now, like a dashboard showing current active attacks or intrusion attempts on your network. Diagnostic analysis. This focuses on analyzing data related to past events. It aims to tell you why something happened. This involves root cause analysis, figuring out the motivations, methods, vulnerabilities behind a past security incident. Exploratory analysis. This is often a precursor to deeper analysis. It deals with exploring relationships among collected data elements, maybe based on initial assumptions or just looking for anomalies without a specific hypothesis yet, kind of like poking around in the data to see what looks interesting. Then we shift to looking forward. Predictive analysis. This deals with analyzing past and current data to predict future events. It tries to tell you what will likely happen.
This is where we might forecast the probability of a specific type of attack, predict an adversary's next move based on their known TTPs, or identify emerging threats before they become widespread. Then we shift to looking forward. And the most advanced level is prescriptive analysis. This uses advanced analytics not just to predict, but to make specific recommendations on what actions to take. It tells you what should we do to prevent or mitigate future threats. This could involve recommending specific patches, suggesting policy changes, advising on firewall reconfigurations, or proposing entirely new defensive strategies. This progression is really key. It helps organizations move from simply reacting to incidents after they occur to being proactive in their defenses and ultimately even strategically anticipating future challenges and shaping their security posture accordingly. Using intelligence to drive decisions. #TAD. Hypothesis-driven analysis and cognitive biases.
Now, since humans are always involved in the analysis loop, that means our own biases, our own ways of thinking can sneak in and affect our judgment, right? How do we account for that, and what techniques help ensure rigorous, objective hypothesis testing in CTIA? This feels like a really important self-awareness aspect for analysts.
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Cognitive biases can seriously warp intelligence assessments if we're not careful. To combat this, we employ structured analytic techniques. A key one is analysis of competing hypotheses, ACH. This is an analytic process where, instead of just trying to prove your favorite hypothesis, you generate multiple plausible hypotheses, maybe gathered from different analysts, and then systematically evaluate them against the available evidence, actively trying to disprove each one. The hypothesis that best fits the evidence and has the least evidence against it emerges as the most likely. It's a much more robust approach. A more refined version is structured analysis of competing hypotheses, SAC. Here you might take one big complex hypothesis and break it down into several smaller, more manageable sub-hypotheses, making the analysis easier and more effective by tackling complexity piece by piece. We also use confirmatory analysis. This deals with analyzing hypotheses with a specified level of precision and confidence, often using statistical methods to produce precise estimates and ensure our conclusions are statistically sound and well supported by the evidence, not just gut feelings.
And those biases you mentioned, what are some of the common pitfalls analysts really need to watch out for in this high-stakes field where objectivity is key?
Yeah, we all need to be constantly aware of cognitive biases. These are basically psychological shortcuts or patterns of thinking where analysts might seem stubborn, biased towards their own theories, maybe subconsciously finding proof to confirm what they already believe while ignoring contradictory evidence. There are many, but some common ones include belief bias, giving more weight to arguments that support your existing beliefs, regardless of the logical validity of the argument itself. Correspondence bias, tendency to overemphasize personality-based explanations for others' behaviors while underemphasizing situational factors, like assuming an attacker is brilliant rather than lucky or exploiting an easy target. Confirmation bias, this is a big one, actively seeking out, interpreting, or recalling information in a way that confirms your pre-existing hypotheses or beliefs, while ignoring or downplaying evidence that contradicts them. Framing, getting stuck within the boundaries of your initial theory, failing to look outside that scope for alternative explanations or broader context. Putting blinders on, hindsight bias, the I knew it all along effect. Claiming past predictions were accurate without having actually gone through a rigorous prediction process at the time. Self-serving bias, attributing successes to your own skills, I'm a great analyst, but blaming failures on external factors, the data was bad. Hinders learning from mistakes. To counter these, besides structured techniques like ACH, we sometimes apply concepts from game theory. This is a technique for studying strategic decision-making in situations involving multiple interacting players. It helps us model and understand adversary decision processes, their likely responses to our actions, forcing us to think more objectively about their motivations and constraints. Being acutely aware of these biases is crucial. It helps you cultivate that critical thinking, that objective analysis, which is absolutely essential in CTIA to avoid reaching flawed conclusions that could have serious real-world consequences. #E statistical methods and data visualization.
Okay, dealing with the sheer amount of data threat intelligence generates, I imagine statistics and data visualization must be absolutely key, right? For finding patterns, making sense of it all, and communicating insights effectively. You can't just read through millions of logs.
They are indispensable tools, absolutely. Quantitative analysis deals with analyzing huge quantities of collected data using numerical and statistical techniques. Qualitative analysis, on the other hand, deals more with analyzing the quality of data, maybe defining the likelihood of a threat based on non-numeric factors like expert judgment or descriptive assessments. Statistical data analysis provides a standard set of processes to efficiently explore data, identify patterns, and test hypotheses. We use terms like statistical distribution. This lists all the possible values in a data set and how often they occur, helping us see frequencies, ranges, outliers. Standard deviation measures how spread out the data is from the average, the mean, telling us about variability and consistency. We also define a confidence level, which describes the probability that the true value we're trying to estimate lies within a certain range based on our sample data. It gives us a measure of certainty in our findings.
And for understanding those crucial relationships within the data, connecting the dots between different indicators or understanding how different threat actors might be linked, what methods help there?
Right. Data correlation is all about finding information about relationships or links between different data points. This helps categorize similar entities or related events. This is where statistics become your detective tools, finding connections. We have specific statistical measures for this, like Pearson's correlation coefficient for measuring linear relationships between variables, or Kendall rank correlation coefficient, and Spearman rank correlation coefficient for relationships that aren't necessarily linear or involve ranked data. The core idea is uncovering those hidden links to understand behavior or predict outcomes. For organizing large data sets, data clustering is a technique for segmenting data into groups or clusters, where items within a cluster have similar properties. This can be hard clustering, where each data point belongs entirely to one cluster or none, or soft clustering, where a data point might have a probability of belonging to multiple clusters. Helps group similar attacks or actors. Data scoring is often used to prioritize.
We assign scores to threats or indicators based on parameters like potential damage level, likelihood of occurrence, reliability of the source, etc. This helps focus attention on the most critical issues first. And finally, visualization is key for communication. Charting involves plotting data in various chart types, bar charts, pie charts, etc., based on properties like value or quantity. Graphing involves plotting data values onto graphs like line graphs or scatter plots to visualize patterns, trends, and relationships over time or between variables. All of this falls under data visualization, the graphical or pictorial representation of data and statistical information. It transforms complex numbers and relationships into understandable patterns of insights that decision-makers can grasp quickly. A good visual tells a story much faster than a table of numbers. Hashtag, tag, F process and flow modeling.
Sometimes it's not just the data we need to visualize, but the processes themselves, right? Like mapping out how an attack unfolds or how our own defense mechanism should work. What tools help with that?
Exactly. For visualizing processes and flows, we use things like data flow diagrams, DFDs. These provide a high-level way of representing how data moves through a system. They can be used to understand how data might be input or exfiltrated during an attack, showing the flow of information. Similarly, process flow diagrams, PFDs, offer a visual representation that allows an analyst to break down a complex process, like an incident response procedure or an adversary's attack chain, into its individual components and see how they interact. This helps map things out clearly, identify potential bottlenecks, or understand sequences of actions systematically.
And we hear so much about AI and machine learning these days. It feels like buzzwords sometimes, but how do they actually fit into threat analysis in the CTIA world? Are they genuinely useful tools?
They're definitely more than just buzzwords now. They offer real, tangible benefits, especially with the volume of data we face. Machine learning is a field within artificial intelligence, focused on developing systems that can learn from and make decisions based on data. It examines human learning and decision-making to try and develop similar capabilities in machines for data analysis. We talk about different types of machine learning. Supervised learning. This is where the computer learns from labeled data. It gets inputs and their corresponding correct outputs, and it figures out the logic to map inputs to outputs, like being shown thousands of pictures labeled cat or dog until it can identify them itself, used for classification, like identifying known malware types. Unsupervised learning. Here, the computer learns by finding patterns and structures in data without any predefined labels or outputs. It discovers hidden relationships on its own, used for anomaly detection, like spotting unusual network traffic that doesn't match normal patterns, even if it's never seen a specific attack before. Semi-supervised learning. This is a mix. The system gets a small amount of labeled data and a large amount of unlabeled data, and it uses both to learn. And reinforcement learning. This is where the system learns through trial and error, receiving rewards or penalties for its actions in a dynamic environment. Think of training an AI to play a game or optimize a response strategy over time. These AI and ML techniques are becoming increasingly vital They can sift through massive amounts of data much faster than humans, identify subtle anomalies, help predict adversary actions based on past behavior, and even automate certain responses, freeing up human analysts for more complex tasks. They are powerful tools in the toolbox.
Okay, let's pivot back to the defensive side of the house. Once we've understood the threats, the adversaries, the methods, what are the key security systems and concepts that form the backbone of protection within an organization? The actual tools and strategies we use to defend ourselves.
Right, starting broadly, the goal is information security, which is defined as achieving a state of well-being for information and infrastructure where the possibility of theft, tampering, and disruption is kept low or tolerable. It's about managing risk. In terms of practical tools and concepts that CTIA professionals need to understand, basic antivirus, AV software is still important, products designed to defend against known viruses, trojans, worms, and other common malware, usually using signature-based detection. IDSEPS, intrusion prevention system. These systems typically sit behind firewalls, monitoring network traffic. They inspect data packets looking for suspicious content or patterns indicative of attacks. An IDS just detects and alerts, while an IPS can actively prevent or block the malicious traffic. A next-generation firewall in GFW. This is more advanced than traditional firewalls. It can detect and block sophisticated attacks by applying rules and policies at the application level. Understanding application behavior, not just ports and IP addresses, often include integrated IPS capabilities. Endpoint security. This focuses on protecting the individual devices connected to the network, laptops, desktops, mobile phones, servers. Protecting the endpoints is crucial because they're often the initial point of compromise. This involves AV, host-based firewalls, endpoint detection and response, EDR tools, network access controls, NACs. These systems automatically discover devices trying to connect to the network. They can enforce policies, check the security posture of the device, is its AV up to date, patched, and grant or deny access accordingly, helps prevent compromised devices from infecting the network. And SIEM, Security Incident and Event Management. This is a critical tool for security operations centers, SOCs. SIEM systems collect and aggregate log data from across the entire infrastructure, firewalls, servers, applications, endpoints, IDS-TSIS. They correlate events, identify potential security incidents, provide real-time monitoring, auditing, and analysis capabilities, giving analysts a centralized view.
And what about those critical points where traffic enters or leaves the network? The gateways, how are they secured?
Right, a gateway is basically a node in the network that routes traffic between different networks, often between the internal network and the internet, or potentially an external command and control C2 server used by attackers. Gateway solutions are security systems specifically designed to monitor traffic passing through these gateways. They inspect traffic for suspicious content, malware, policy violations, and can block malicious communication entering or leaving the network. They act as a vital checkpoint. Also fundamental for secure communication, especially over the web, is the SSL/TLS certificate. This is a cryptographic protocol that enables secure, encrypted communication over computer networks, particularly the World Wide Web. It establishes that secure connection, HTTPS, ensuring data confidentiality and integrity during transmission. That little padlock icon you see in your browser, #tag defense strategies.
Okay, so those are mostly reactive tools, detecting and blocking things. What about the proactive strategies? How does CTIA encourage thinking ahead of the threat, almost getting inside the attacker's head before they act?
Proactivity is absolutely essential for effective defense.
Yeah.
You can't just wait to be hit. Operational security, OPSC, is a key concept here. It's a risk management process where you deliberately analyze your own operations, your own information, from an adversary's perspective. You ask, what critical information might look valuable to an attacker? How might they try to get it? How can we protect it or make it less revealing? It's about thinking like the attacker to identify and protect your own sensitive data before they do. Cyber Counterintelligence, CCI, is another proactive approach. It's about actively protecting your organization against the adversary's intelligence-gathering operations. This could involve detecting their reconnaissance efforts, feeding them disinformation, identifying insider threats working for them, or neutralizing their attempts to spy on you. It's defense against their intelligence work. And host integrity monitoring is crucial for detecting compromises early. This is the process of establishing a baseline for critical system files and configurations on a host, and then continuously monitoring for any unauthorized changes.
If a critical file is modified or a suspicious configuration change occurs, it generates an alert, allowing for rapid investigation before an attacker can establish persistence or cause significant damage. #CX storage solutions and sinkholing.
With all this data collection and intelligence generation, where does it all get stored? And what exactly is sinkholing? That sounds like a very specific tactical defense move.
For storage, there are various models depending on the organization's needs, scale, and security requirements. Centralized storage. Data is stored in one localized system, server, or storage array. Simpler to manage, potentially a single point of failure. Distributed storage. Storage is spread across multiple systems or servers, often at different physical locations. Offers better redundancy, scalability, and potentially performance. Cloud storage. Data is stored on a network of servers managed by a third-party hosting organization, like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. Offers high scalability, accessibility, and often robust security, but requires careful management of access and configurations. Now, sinkholing, yeah, that's a very cool and effective defensive tactic. It allows you to redirect network traffic intended for known malicious IP addresses or domains to a controlled server, the sinkhole that you manage. The purpose is usually to prevent malware already on your network from successfully communicating back to its command and control C2 servers. By redirecting those DNS requests or connections to your sinkhole, you cut off the malware's lifeline. It can't get new instructions, download updates, or exfiltrate stolen data. This can be internal sinkholing, where you manipulate DNS settings or configurations on internal victim machines or your internal DNS servers to redirect traffic. Or it can be external sinkholing, where you might work with ISPs or DNS providers to redirect malicious traffic at a larger scale, often over the internet. It's essentially like diverting enemy communications into a trap where you can analyze them safely while neutralizing the immediate threat.
Managing a whole threat intelligence program sounds like a huge job. It must require serious planning, resources, oversight. What are the key elements involved in actually managing and executing such a program effectively?
It absolutely does. It's not just about the tech. It's about managing it like any major organizational initiative. A project charter is often the starting point. It's a relatively short document outlining the entire program, its objectives, goals, scope, how it will be carried out, key stakeholders, high-level budget. Sets the direction. Rules of engagement, ROE, are critical. This is the formal permission, the authorization to actually implement the threat intelligence program and conduct its activities. It clearly defines what actions are allowed and not allowed, under what circumstances, ensuring legal, ethical, and policy compliance. Very important for activities like active reconnaissance or honeypot operation. You then need to schedule threat intelligence program activities. This involves planning timelines, allocating resources, people, tools, budget, defining milestones, and communicating the plan. Standard project management. For prioritization, the Moscow method is often useful. It helps categorize requirements into must-have, should-have, could-have, and won't-have, at least for this phase. Helps focus effort on what's most critical. Critical path analysis is a project modeling technique. It maps out all the required activities, estimates their duration, identifies dependencies between them, and highlights the critical path, the sequence of tasks that determines the project's minimum duration. Helps manage timelines effectively. And the scope baseline represents the agreed-upon project scope, often linked to funding constraints or specific deliverables mandated by the organization or stakeholders. Keeps the project focused and within approved boundaries. #, financial and trust considerations.
Right, and every program needs money. Cyber defense isn't free. How is budgeting handled in CTIA? And how do financial factors play in, both internally and maybe when thinking about adversaries?
Finances are always a reality. The budget for a threat intelligence program simply represents the total combined cost of all the activities it needs to perform: staffing salaries, software licenses, hardware, data feeds, training, etc. The basis of estimation involves the supporting documents that detail how those costs were estimated for each activity, providing transparency and justification for the budget request. And cost estimation of activities is the process of actually estimating the cost for each individual task or activity within the program plan. Interestingly, concepts from behavioral economics can sometimes be relevant. This field studies how social, cognitive, and emotional factors influence people's financial decisions. This might be important when considering adversary funding models, how criminal groups finance their operations, or even internally, understand the psychological factors that influence how organizations allocate resources to security versus other priorities.
And in this world full of threats, hidden actors, and the need to share sensitive information, trust is absolutely fundamental, isn't it? What are the different ways trust is established or modeled in this field, especially for collaboration?
Indeed. Trust underpins everything in intelligence sharing. Without trust in the source or the information, the intelligence is useless. There are several models or bases for trust. Direct historical trust. This is built over time through positive past interactions. If an organization or source has consistently provided reliable information in the past, you build trust based on that history. Mediated trust. This involves a trusted third party vouching for someone else. A central organization or respected entity acts as a mediator, providing assurance that helps establish trust between two parties who might not know each other directly. Mandated trust. This occurs when an authority like a government agency or regulatory body issues a specific mandate requiring organizations to trust and share information with each other or with the mandating body. And validated trust. This is established when one organization uses evidence like a security audit report, adherence to a specific standard like ISO 27001, or results from a formal assessment to verify the trustworthiness or security posture of another organization. These models help define the level and scope of trust in information exchanges, which is critical for confidently acting on intelligence received from external sources. #CC. Roles and responsibilities within CTIA.
Who are all the different players in this whole ecosystem? From the systems generating raw logs all the way up to the executives making big strategic decisions. Understanding these roles seems vital for making sure the right intel gets to the right people in the right way.
It absolutely is. The intelligence ecosystem involves a whole chain of roles, each with different needs and contributions. At the very bottom, you have raw data producers. These are the systems generating the initial logs and alerts, firewalls, proxy servers, endpoint detection systems, IDS sensors. They create the raw material. Then you have threat data consumers. These are often automated security systems like an IDSIPS or a SIM that ingest this raw threat data directly to perform automated detection and prevention actions based on simple rules or signatures. Threat intelligence producers are often external entities, commercial vendors, ISACs, open source projects, research groups, or internal analysis teams that synthesize raw data into finished intelligence products and share them. And threat intelligence consumers can be remote management platforms, internal security dashboards, or specific teams within the organization that ingest and utilize this finished intelligence for various purposes. Now, in terms of the human roles within an organization that consume intelligence, we typically categorize them by their needs and focus. Operational users. These are the folks on the front lines. The incident response, IR teams, network defenders, forensic analysts, fraud detection staff. They need granular, real-time technical intelligence for immediate tactical decision-making during an ongoing incident or investigation. Give them IOCs, technical details, tactical users. This group includes cybersecurity professionals like IT service managers, security operations center, SOC managers, network operations center, NOC staff, system administrators, security architects. They need intelligence about adversary TTPs, tactics, techniques, procedures to adjust defenses, implement new security controls, refine policies, and improve detection capabilities. They need to know how the attackers operate. And strategic users. These are the high-level executives and senior management, CIOs, maybe even the CEO or the board. They consume strategic reports. These are high-level summaries focusing on the overall cybersecurity posture, major threat trends, potential business impact of threats, risk assessments, and implications for long-term strategy and investment. They need the big picture, the so what for the business. This distinction between operational, tactical, and strategic users is really key. It helps ensure that the intelligence produced is tailored appropriately for each audience, making it relevant, understandable, and actionable for their specific roles and responsibilities.
So it's really clear that the intelligence produced isn't one size fits all. It has to be tailored for these different needs, different audiences, from the super technical analyst up to the C-suite. Can you walk us through those different types of threat intelligence and how they serve these varying purposes?
Precisely. Just like we have different users with different needs, we produce different types or categories of intelligence, each designed for a specific purpose and audience. Strategic threat intelligence. This provides that high-level information about the overall cybersecurity posture, broad threat trends, geopolitical factors affecting cyber risk, and the potential impact of major threats on the business itself. It's for the boardroom, for executives making long-term policy, risk management, and investment decisions. Operational threat intelligence. This provides timely information about specific, often imminent threats targeting the organization. Things like details on an incoming phishing campaign hitting specific departments, alerts about a new vulnerability being actively exploited against your systems, or indicators of an ongoing intrusion. It's actionable for security operations teams right now, informing their immediate defensive actions and incident response. Tactical threat intelligence. This dives deeper into how adversaries operate. It provides detailed information related to threat actors' TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Remember, Tactics are the high-level guidelines for how an attack is conducted from start to finish, while techniques are the specific technical methods used to achieve intermediate results during each stage of the attack. Understanding TTPs allows defenders to recognize adversary behavior patterns and proactively block their common moves or deploy countermeasures against specific techniques. And technical threat intelligence. This provides highly specific, often granular information about the technical artifact and resources an attacker uses. Things like specific IP addresses for command and control servers, file hashes of malware samples, malicious domain names, specific tools like malware or hacking utilities they employ. This is the most technical form of intelligence, often directly fed into security tools like firewalls, SIEMs, and endpoint protection for automated blocking or alerting.
So it follows then that the data collection needed for these different types of intelligence would also be different, right? You'd be looking for different kinds of raw data depending on whether you're trying to build a strategic report versus technical indicators.
Yes, exactly. The collection efforts need to be tailored to the type of intelligence you're aiming to produce. Otherwise, you waste resources collecting data you can't use for that specific output. Strategic threat intelligence data collection. This focuses on gathering information for high-level analysis consumed by strategists and senior leaders. It might involve analyzing geopolitical reports, industry threat landscape reports, long-term adversary campaign tracking, economic indicators related to cybercrime, and regulatory changes. Operational threat intelligence data collection. This involves gathering actionable information on specific incoming attacks or active events affecting the organization's network. Sources include real-time alerts from internal security tools, SIEM, IDS, honeypot logs, incident reports from peers, urgent bulletins from vendors or ISACs. Needs to be timely and specific. Tactical threat intelligence data collection. This consists of collecting detailed reports on attack groups, specific campaigns, and past incidents. Sources include malware analysis reports, adversary TTP databases like MITRE, ATT, and CK, detailed incident response findings, and reports from threat research organizations.
Focuses on the how. And technical threat intelligence data collection. This gathers those highly granular specific indicators. Sources include malware reverse engineering, sandbox analysis outputs, network traffic analysis for C2 channels, phishing email header analysis, domain registration data, and public IOC feeds. Focuses on the technical artifacts. All of this collected data, once processed and analyzed appropriately for its intended purpose, often contributes to various threat intelligence feeds. These are essentially continuous streams of indicators or enriched data delivered in a timely manner from various internal and external sources related to potential or evolving threats relevant to the organization's security posture. #TAG reporting. Reporting and measuring effectiveness.
How is all this carefully crafted intelligence actually presented and shared with its intended audience? And maybe just as importantly, how do we measure if it's actually effective? How do we know if the Intel program is making a difference? That seems like the crucial feedback loop.
Right. Dissemination and measuring effectiveness are key to demonstrating value and improving the process. Intelligence is typically presented through various types of reports tailored for their audience. Threat reports. These often provide broad statistics and research related to cyber attacks happening globally or within a specific sector. Gives general situational awareness. Threat intelligence reports. These are usually more detailed prose documents describing specific attacks, adversary TTPs, threat actors involved, and the systems or information they're targeting. Could be tactical or operational. Threat analysis reports. These provide in-depth analysis of a specific threat, vulnerability, or incident, often intended for technical audiences like IR teams, forensic analysts, or anti-fraud specialists. Very detailed. Threat landscape reports. These offer a comprehensive overview and deeper insight into the specific threats an organization is facing, considering its industry, geography, technology stack, etc., often strategic in nature. Now, measuring effectiveness is crucial for continuous improvement. We use metrics like encounter rate. This tracks how many relevant IOCs received from intelligence feeds were actually detected or encountered within the organization's environment. Helps gauge the relevance and timeliness of the feeds. False positive rate. This measures the number of indicators received that turned out to be redundant, irrelevant, or incorrect, leading to wasted effort. A high false positive rate indicates poor quality intelligence or poorly tuned detection rules. Aim is to minimize this. Risk scores. These are often used to prioritize alerts generated from intelligence feeds, feeding into SIMs or other tools. They help categorize threats based on severity, confidence, and relevance, allowing human analysts to quickly decide which indicators warrant immediate investigation. Tracking these metrics helps refine the intelligence collection, analysis, and dissemination processes, ensuring the program delivers truly valuable and actionable insights. #C. other important contextual terms.
Before we wrap up, are there any other broad contextual terms that are helpful for understanding the wider cyber landscape where all this operates, especially thinking about where information lives online?
Yes, a few key terms help frame the environment. The surface web. This is the part of the internet most people use daily. It's indexed by standard search engines like Google and easily accessible through normal web browsers. The deep web. This is a much larger layer of online cyberspace, consisting of content that is not indexed by standard search engines. Access typically requires direct links, specific credentials, or database queries. Think online banking portals, private cloud storage, subscription databases, internal corporate sites, and the dark web, or darknet. This is a deeper, intentionally hidden layer of cyberspace, a subset of the deep web. It requires special software, like Tor, to access, and is designed to enable anonymous communication and navigation. While used for legitimate purposes where anonymity is critical, it's also heavily used for illicit activities, the black markets, forums for criminals, etc. Knowing these distinctions helps understand where adversaries might operate or where certain types of intelligence, like OSINT or data from illicit forums, might be found. Finally, a couple more standardization efforts worth knowing. Cyber Observable Expression, CyboX. This was an earlier effort, now largely superseded by STIX 2.x, but it was standardized language for encoding and communicating detailed information about cyber observables, like files, processes, network connections. CAPAC, Common Attack Pattern Enumeration and Classification. This is a publicly available catalog of common attack patterns. It classifies attacks in an intuitive way, describing the how of attacks at a slightly higher level than individual techniques, providing a common language for discussing attack methods and defensive strategies. CAPEC, Common Attack Pattern Enumeration and Classification, hashtag Key Learning Points and Recap. Okay, wow, we really covered a lot of ground there. That was a pretty deep dive into the essential language of CTIA. So, to quickly recap the absolute critical takeaways, first remember that fundamental hierarchy. Data, information, and intelligence. It's crucial. Raw data becomes information with context, and information becomes intelligence through analysis, driving decisions. That's the core mission. We also spend time on the diverse world of adversaries, from hacktivists to APTs to insiders. Understanding their intent, capability, and opportunity, and especially their TTPs, tactics, techniques, procedures, is vital. Knowing who and how is half the battle. Then we hit on the importance of structured frameworks like the cyber kill plane and the diamond model for systematic analysis and the proactive power of threat modeling. These give you the mental scaffolding to handle complexity. We reviewed the different kinds of indicators of compromise, IOCs, those digital breadcrumbs, and touched on the inherent challenges of attribution, figuring out whodunit. We recapped the wide array of data collection methods and intelligence sources from OSINT to human and beyond, and the critical role of secure sharing mechanisms like STIX-TAC2 for machine-readable threat intelligence, MRTI. We underscored how raw data transforms into valuable intelligence through various analysis techniques, including statistics and prescriptive methods, and crucially, the need to constantly fight against cognitive biases to stay objective. And we briefly touched on key security mechanisms and the essential management aspects of running a CTIA program effectively. If we connect this all to the bigger picture. All these terms are deeply interconnected. Mastering them isn't just about passing a test by memorizing definitions. It's really about building a robust mental model for cybersecurity. It equips you with the foundational understanding, the vocabulary, and the frameworks to see patterns where others just see chaos. Hashtag tech closing notes.
Wow, that was genuinely a comprehensive deep dive. It really hammered home how this glossary isn't just a list, it's the actual language of threat intelligence. You've given us so much to connect and think about. It really feels like the bedrock for everything else in CTIA.
My pleasure. And that's exactly it. Knowledge is most valuable when it's truly understood and applied. These terms, they're more than just vocabulary words. They are the tools you use for critical thinking, the building blocks for your analysis, and the foundation for constructing effective defenses. They help you see those hidden patterns, anticipate the unseen threats, and, importantly, communicate clearly and precisely in a field where that precision can make all the difference.
So thinking about our listeners continuing on their CTIA journey, diving into the next chapters, what's the single most important thing they should take away from this glossary deep dive?
This raises an important question. I'd say this. As you move forward, always remember that every single successful threat intelligence operation, every good piece of analysis, begins with a clear shared understanding of these fundamental concepts. Don't just learn the definitions. Strive to understand their practical implications, how they help you identify, analyze, and ultimately mitigate real-world threats. The clarity you gain from truly internalizing this glossary, this language, will illuminate everything that follows. It will make you a more effective, more confident, and ultimately a much more impactful threat intelligence analyst. It's a foundation absolutely worth building solid.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Thank you so much for guiding us through this absolutely essential chapter. To our listeners, stay curious, keep learning, keep connecting those dots, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive, where we'll continue to bring those official study guides to life.